Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're trying to figure out how we can be making these incredible scientific leaps forward, while it feels like global politics is just, well, grinding to a halt, you're in exactly the right place.
Right.
We've put together a really detailed snapshot of what's happening in early 2026, and it shows a world being pulled in two totally different directions at the same time.
It's the ultimate tension, isn't it?
Yeah.
On one hand, you have this microscopic power, things like quantum innovation, rethinking the human cell, this incredibly focused AI.
And on the other,
Massive systems-level conflict. We're talking geopolitical clashes over land, over resources, and really over the basic rules of international law. It's this dynamic between the incredibly small and the overwhelmingly large that is shaping, well, everything right now.
So our mission today is to cut right through that noise. We're going to start by exploring discoveries that are literally redefining what we know about human anatomy and even the nature of consciousness itself. Then we'll get into the AI arms race, the staggering money involved, and the very dangerous legal problems facing some of the biggest tech giants.
And finally, we will unpack the geopolitical flashpoints that are really defining this moment. From, aggressive maritime enforcement off the coasts of Scotland and Venezuela, all the way to this high-stakes scramble for the Arctic.
Right. And we'll wrap it all up by looking at the economic realities, the societal strains that really show how these huge global forces trickle all the way down to affect, local communities, farmers, even people who just own a beach hut.
Exactly. The goal is to find those crucial nuggets of knowledge. We want you to understand not just what happened, but the consequential so what of it all. What does this actually mean for understanding 2026?
Okay, let's unpack this monumental stack of news, and we have to start small. I mean, microscopically small, right at the frontier of science, because the things we all thought we knew about the human body are, well, suddenly turning out to be wrong. I mean, for decades, we've had the standard anatomical models from school. You think you know where everything is, where everything goes.
Right, the textbook diagram.
Exactly. But recent findings, especially some research coming out of Stanford Medicine, suggests there's been this massive hidden infrastructure inside us the whole time. They're calling it the hidden fiber network. What is this, and why on earth are we just finding it now?
This is, and I don't think this is an exaggeration, a truly foundational shift in anatomy. It could genuinely rewrite the textbooks.
Wow.
Researchers have identified these widespread microscopic networks of connective tissue fibers. It's mostly collagen and elastin,
Yeah.
and they permeate every single tissue.
So these aren't new fibers. We knew they were there.
Oh, we knew they were there, but we thought they were just passive scaffolding. Filler material that holds your organs and blood vessels in place.
So kind of like the biological equivalent of packing peanuts, just there to keep things from rattling around.
Exactly that. But it turns out they are far from it. This deep dive shows these networks are highly active, really sophisticated pathways. They're actually transmitting mechanical forces within the body.
What does that mean, mechanical forces?
Think about muscle movement. Efficient movement isn't just a nerve telling a muscle to contract. It involves the mechanical force of that contraction traveling along these fibers for maximum coordination.
Okay, so it's a communication system.
A very sophisticated one. The research showed them regulating movement and coordination in places you wouldn't expect, like the intestines. They seem to be a kind of mechanical bioelectric communications superhighway that connects everything, running underneath the neural and circulatory systems we already knew about.
That sounds revolutionary. So how did they manage to map something that was missed for so long? Was it some huge, expensive, new machine?
And that's maybe the most beautiful part of this. It wasn't a multi-billion-dollar super collider. They pioneered a novel, non-invasive imaging technique. It just uses simple LED light and some very advanced microscopy. And because the method is non-destructive, it visualizes these microstructural fiber orientations so clearly.
So you don't have to ruin the tissue to see them.
Exactly. Which meant researchers found they could apply it to tissue samples that were a century old and still map these networks perfectly.
100 years old.
100 years old.
Wow.
That capability just instantly unlocks the potential to go back and re-examine all these historic biological samples and accelerate our understanding without needing new live data.
So if the body has this built-in mechanical communication grid, what are the immediate implications for medicine? Where do we go with this?
So what here is profound, especially for fields like physical therapy, oncology, biomechanics. If mechanical forces are communicated through these fibers to regulate everything from organ function to muscle efficiency, well then our therapeutic interventions have to adapt.
So you're not just treating the chemistry, you're treating the physics of the body.
Precisely. We can begin engineering treatments, physical treatments, not just pharmaceutical ones, that target these mechanical pathways directly. It suggests that highly specific movement or targeted pressure could unlock healing processes far more quickly than we realize because we're finally engaging with the body's own innate system of communication.
Speaking of innate energy, let's shift to a concept called flexoelectricity. It sounds complex, but the basic idea is that our own cells might be these tiny miniature energy generators. Can you just break that down for us?
Of course. Flexoelectricity is the phenomenon where mechanical stress or deformation, literally, the bending or squeezing of a material, generates an electric polarization.
Which means it produces a voltage.
It produces a voltage. Now, just apply that to biology. Cells in our bodies are constantly deforming. They're moving, growing, dividing, just responding to all kinds of pressure.
So every single time a cell changes shape, it produces a tiny electrical charge, like a microscopic dynamo.
Precisely. And this is now being explored as a highly significant physiological effect. For example, some researchers are guessing that these flexoelectric effects might play a fundamental role in how neurons fire so quickly and efficiently.
So it could actually influence how signals travel through our nervous system.
It could. But if this charge is generated by, just bending, how does the cell harvest it efficiently without it just dissipating immediately? Is this still just a theory, or have they actually built something that works? That is the critical engineering challenge, and that's where the focus is shifting now, from the basic science to the applied technology. The ultimate potential here is in energy harvesting. If we can develop material or devices that are sensitive enough to capture that constant, subtle mechanical movement of our biological processes, we could power electronics entirely from within the body.
That opens up some amazing possibilities for permanent medical devices. You're talking about a pacemaker that could use the slight movement of the heart muscle itself to maintain its own power.
Exactly.
Which would eliminate the need for these really invasive battery replacement surgeries every few years.
Exactly that. And beyond pacemakers, just imagine implantable sensors or developing bio-inspired smart materials for prosthetics that generate their own power as they move.
So they would mimic the self-sufficiency of our own biology.
This is where biology and engineering are colliding to create truly revolutionary, self-sustaining medical technology.
Okay, so if we can wrap our heads around mechanical stress generating electricity in our cells, we have to move to the mechanics of the mind. And this is a big one. We're going to discuss a radical new theory that suggests human consciousness doesn't just emerge from neural connections, but from a mysterious quantum field. This is next level high concept stuff.
This takes us into the deeply speculative but absolutely compelling world of theoretical neuroscience. Specifically, a theory called OR. It stands for Orchestrated Objective Reduction. It's championed by the physicist Roger Penrose and an anesthesiologist, Stuart Hameroff. And they basically challenge the classical view that the brain is just a very complex classical computer, running on standard chemical and electrical signals.
What specifically do they think is maintaining a quantum state inside a warm, wet brain?
They hypothesize that these tiny structures called microtubules, they're these highly ordered protein cylinders found inside the axons of our neurons, that they are the location for these quantum processes.
Oh, okay, why them?
Structurally, they're perfectly suited to maintain a state of what's called quantum superposition, where a particle can exist in multiple states at the same time, which is just fundamental to quantum mechanics.
But wait, quantum states are notoriously fragile. I mean, they collapse instantly if you look at them wrong, under the slightest thermal noise or interference. So how could something inside a constantly noisy brain maintain this state long enough to generate stable consciousness?
That is the primary counterargument against OR, and it's a very good one. Penrose and Hameroff argue that the unique structure of the microtubules somehow shields and orchestrates this quantum activity.
That's the ORCH part of the name.
That's the ORCH part. The second part, objective reduction, or, is what links consciousness to fundamental physics. They propose that consciousness arises when these quantum states collapse, not randomly, but due to self-generated gravitational effects that are inherent in space-time itself.
Wait. So the moment of conscious awareness isn't just a neurological event in my brain. It's a consequence of fundamental physics linking my mind directly to the geometry of space-time.
That is the massive philosophical leap they're making. It is, and it's highly, highly divisive. But if it's proven, it could explain phenomena that classical models really struggle with, like the unified subjective nature of experience, what philosophers call qualia, and is the incredible processing speed of the mind.
So it forces us to ask whether consciousness is just computation or if it's something deeper rooted in the cosmos itself.
That is the question. It's a fundamental one for neuroscientists, physicists, and philosophers.
Okay, we've just spent several minutes contemplating whether our mind is linked to space-time. Let's maybe take a breath before we dive into why some people simply cannot stop seeking revenge.
A bit of a pivot.
A bit of one, yes. We're moving from quantum uncertainty to a kind of psychological certainty. The uncomfortable idea that revenge isn't just a moral failing, but a neurological compulsion.
That's a fascinating, if very dark pivot. But recent behavioral science research, including work by people like James Kimmel Jr. from Yale University, suggests that the drive for revenge is deeply tied to the brain's reward system.
The same system that fuels substance addiction.
The very same one. So the brain is essentially conditioning us to crave conflict by giving us a neurological reward for it.
How does that work?
When a person seeks or achieves retaliation, the brain releases a flood of dopamine and other neurochemicals. This creates a temporary but very powerful sense of satisfaction or closure or what feels like justice.
And that rush reinforces the behavior.
Exactly. It sets up this revenge addiction loop where the individual is constantly seeking the next fix of retribution, which often leads to escalating conflicts.
And Kimmel's theory connects this ancient neurological instinct to huge societal problems. Everything from petty crime to these entrenched cycles of gun violence we see in some communities. So if this is truly an addiction, how does that change our approach to preventing it?
Well, it shifts prevention from being a purely punitive or moral challenge to being a public health imperative. If the craving for revenge is mediated by the same reward pathways as opioids or alcohol, then, just locking someone up might not address the root impulse at all.
So instead, we should be looking at recovery models. Is that the idea?
Absolutely. Kimmel suggests adapting structured frameworks that have been successful in overcoming other dependencies, like the 12-step program model used in Alcoholics Anonymous, or AA.
So the focus becomes interrupting that neurological craving cycle.
Yes, through psychological intervention. This means rigorous programs focused on cultivating empathy, intensive forgiveness training, and providing sustained emotional support to manage that impulse for retaliation before it can escalate into violence. It's a fundamental change in how we view and address crime that's driven by retribution.
All right, now we step away from biology and psychology and plunge right back into the deepest end of pure physics, where scientists are really pushing the boundaries. First up, resistance-free quantum transport.
This is a truly astonishing discovery that fundamentally challenges classical physics. Scientists managed to confine an ultra-cold gas of atoms to a one-dimensional line. In classical physics, if you have a line of objects and they start colliding, they have to slow down. They dissipate energy as heat because of resistance. That's just the rule of friction.
But the quantum world had different plans, apparently.
It certainly did. They observed what they're calling a perfect transport mechanism. Despite countless collisions between these atoms, the energy and momentum traveled right through the line unimpeded, without slowing down at all.
It's like a perfect Newton's cradle.
Almost exactly like a theoretical, frictionless Newton's cradle, where the momentum passes instantly from one end to the other with zero loss.
That is genuinely astonishing. If collisions don't cause resistance in this state, what does this tell us about how energy moves at the quantum level?
It suggests that when you constrain a system in this very specific one-dimensional quantum state, it somehow circumvents the normal rules of thermalization and friction.
And the potential for technology.
Oh, it's immense. Think about the energy we lose every second due to resistance in wires and electronics and power grids. If we can engineer materials based on this principle, we could see huge breakthroughs in superconductivity energy transfer with zero loss.
So our devices would be vastly more powerful and efficient.
And less reliant on cooling. It could dramatically increase the efficiency and lifespan of electronic components. It's a game changer.
And if that wasn't enough, the next breakthrough deals with stabilizing those fragile quantum systems against total chaos. We're talking about achieving something called quantum coherence against chaos.
Right. Chaos is the expected fate for any strongly interacting quantum system, especially when you're constantly bombarding it with external forces.
What were they doing here?
Imagine scientists repeatedly hitting this quantum system with high-frequency laser impulses. The classical expectation is that the system would just thermalize, it would absorb the energy, its structure would dissolve into maximum disorder, and it would just heat up and fall apart.
But the system resisted this collapse into chaos.
It did. Instead of descending into chaos, the system reached a state of stable motion, even under these continuous external forces. And the key ingredient here was quantum coherence.
Okay, what is that exactly?
It's the ability of the particles to act as a single unified wave, existing in a synchronized relationship, rather than as just a bunch of individual chaotic components.
So the coherence essentially allowed the system to tune out the external noise and maintain its own stability.
That's a great way to put it.
That sounds like a dream for quantum computing, given that decoherence, that loss of stability, is the biggest enemy of qubits.
That's the critical application. Decoherence, usually caused by thermal disturbances or external noise, is what destroys the fragile computational state of a qubit. If we can engineer systems that maintain coherence even when they're being agitated,
They resist non-thermalization.
right, then we are looking at massively more resilient and powerful quantum computers. And beyond that, this could lead to advanced materials that are intrinsically resistant to thermal breakdown, revolutionizing everything from aerospace to microprocessors.
And of course, the race to capitalize on these quantum breakthroughs is driving some of the wildest venture capital valuations we have ever seen. So let's pivot now from the lab bench to the market frenzy. So from the invisible mechanisms of physics, we zoom right out to the invisible hand of the market, specifically what everyone is calling the AI arms race. The numbers being reported are just staggering, even compared to past tech booms.
These valuations, they really do defy traditional metrics.
Okay.
Let's just look at Anthropic, the AI startup that was founded by former OpenAI employees. They have a big focus on safety.
Right.
They are reportedly in discussions to secure another major capital influx, $10 billion, which would boost their valuation to an astronomical $350 billion.
$350 billion. I mean, that's their third massive capital injection in a single year, according to the reports.
It is.
To put that into perspective for everyone listening, that valuation puts Anthropic ahead of established giants like ByteDance and SpaceX. And it's getting pretty close to OpenAI, which is valued around $500 billion. This is all moving lightning fast.
It really underscores the intensity of the competition. What seems to distinguish Anthropic, and probably justifies the faith investors have, is their stated focus on AI safety. It's embodied in their Claude models.
They built safety in from the ground up.
Exactly. They built safety and, constitutionality into the core of the design. And that mission has attracted these big strategic partners who see Anthropic as a necessary hedge in this whole arms race.
And these partners aren't just writing checks, are they? They're committing enormous infrastructure. Microsoft, for instance, has pledged around $5 billion. And NVIDIA, the king of AI chips, has committed up to $10 billion.
And those are not just investment dollars. You should think of them as infrastructure security payments. Microsoft and NVIDIA are trying to secure crucial access to Anthropic's future AI models. And just as importantly, secure a market for their own chips and cloud services. It's an arms race for talent, for computation, and for strategic positioning.
So if the future of computing is AI, these giants are just paying whatever it takes to ensure they are indispensable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this intense confidence in what's called deep tech, this melding of basic science and tech application, is mirrored all across the venture capital world. Lux Capital, a firm known for backing ventures that turn sci-fi into sci-fact, just secured its largest fund ever.
Lux Ventures 9X, right?
Yes, at a substantial $1.5 billion.
Yeah.
And their target sectors are explicit: aerospace, life sciences, defense, and specialized AI. It signals a real shift away from consumer apps toward fundamental, difficult, capital-intensive technology.
And we see this focus even in smaller, more specialized AI firms.
We do. Look at Spangle AI, founded by the former CEO of Bolt, Maju Kuruvilla. It just raised $15 million, valuing the company at $100 million simply by focusing on something called agentic AI.
Agentic AI, that means AI designed to proactively take actions, right? To complete goals, not just respond to prompts. And Spangle is aiming to revolutionize the e-commerce experience.
Precisely. Kuvilla is leveraging his past experience to tackle that really disjointed process that happens after a customer clicks an ad online. They want AI agents to create these seamless, guided, and highly customized shopping journeys that maximize conversion.
So it illustrates a key trend. The money isn't just flowing to the massive foundational model makers like Anthropic.
No, it's also flowing to these highly specialized companies that can integrate proactive AI agents into very lucrative, very complex sectors like retail and logistics.
The investment is surging, the valuations are stratospheric, and the promise is always productivity. But there is a major problem emerging that every business listener really needs to be aware of: the productivity paradox.
This is the critical reality check. While trillions are being invested and AI adoption is widespread, a recent report highlighted that 95% of surveyed companies report no significant revenue uplift from their AI initiatives.
95%.
And this phenomenon has been perfectly dubbed work slop.
Work slop, that perfectly describes it. AI-generated output that is just voluminous but lacks any substantive value or quality. So why is this happening? If the tech is so advanced, why are businesses failing to turn that potential into profit?
Well, there are several critical factors driving work slop. It's not just a failure to adopt. First, data quality. AI models are often trained on poor, biased, or just messy internal data, which leads to poor output.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Always. Second, strategic misalignment. Businesses are just plugging AI into their existing flawed processes instead of redesigning workflows around the technology's strengths. They're measuring volume. How many emails did the AI draft? Instead of strategic impact, how effectively did the AI solve a key business problem?
So the lack of revenue uplift isn't the AI's fault, it's the organization's inability to integrate it effectively.
Exactly. The core nugget of knowledge here is that AI potential doesn't automatically translate into tangible economic rewards. Businesses have to shift their focus from mere speed and volume to quality and effectiveness. To avoid work slop, you need human oversight that doesn't just check for errors, but ensures the AI output is targeted, valuable, and actually measurable against real business goals.
Moving from money to ethics, the rapid, sometimes chaotic acceleration of AI has already led to some immediate tragic consequences. And that's forcing a reckoning in the legal system. We are now seeing the shadow of chatbot misuse become a major legal liability.
This is perhaps the most sobering element of this whole tech section. Google and Character.ai have reached landmark legal settlements in the first wave of major lawsuits.
And what do these suits allege?
They allege that their chatbots contributed directly to mental health crises and even suicides among teenagers across 4 U.S. states.
The core claim was that these platforms allowed for customizable characters, but lacked sufficient safety guardrails for vulnerable young users who were then forming these intense, often damaging relationships with the AI.
Yes.
What does this set as a legal precedent?
It's massive. Until now, tech companies have enjoyed really broad immunity for user-generated content. But these settlements suggest that if the design of the chatbot product itself encourages or exacerbates mental health deterioration, the developers could be held liable for the real-world harm that's caused by the AI's conversational output.
So it forces a fundamental reevaluation of product safety in this whole space.
It does. And these liability concerns are extending to the newest platforms as well. There have been serious questions raised about Elon Musk's Grok AI.
That's right. Independent analysts and child protection organizations found alarming reports indicating users were exploiting Grok's uncensored nature to generate images and content related to child sexual exploitation.
And this material was often linked to dark web forums. The responsibility on developers to implement robust safety filters against such horrific and illegal outputs has to be absolute, but the speed of deployment just seems to be outpacing the ethical guardrails.
And we also saw a media personality, Maya Jama, publicly request that Grok refrain from modifying or editing photos of her.
Which underscores the immediate privacy and consent concerns related to AI-generated or manipulated images. The UK regulator, Ofcom, that's the Office of Communications, has already launched an inquiry into X, which was formerly Twitter, over these specific deepfake-related concerns.
So regulatory bodies and legal systems are just desperately trying to catch up to the technology's capabilities.
They are. These legal settlements and regulatory inquiries, they're not just about punishment. They are crucial in forcing the accountability that's necessary to ensure that the deployment of these powerful tools doesn't undermine fundamental ethical norms or public safety.
But AI integration isn't all crisis. I mean, it's relentless, and it's often genuinely beneficial. Let's look at how AI is merging into daily life, starting with education. Google Classroom has rolled out a new Gemini AI tool that sounds really innovative for diverse learners.
It's a fantastic application that directly addresses different learning preferences. The Gemini AI tool can take a teacher's standard written lesson plan or reading assignment and instantly transform it into a full podcast-style audio episode,
Complete with narration and sound effects.
complete with varied narration and sound effects. This is huge for auditory learners or for students with dyslexia or other learning disabilities.
And that must save teachers immense time, letting them focus on actual instruction rather than content production. But given what we just discussed about work slop, is human oversight still absolutely mandatory here?
Critically so. Google has emphasized that the tool is designed to empower, not replace. Teachers have to manually check the AI-generated audio material for any factual inaccuracies, biases, or misinterpretations before they give it to their students.
So AI is a powerful assistant, but the nuanced judgment and ethical responsibility still rests with the human educator.
Squarely.
Okay, away from the classroom and onto the road. Ford is advancing its hands-free driving with its next-generation Blue Cruise technology.
The key strategic move here is cost. Ford has engineered its next-gen Blue Cruise to be 30% cheaper to produce.
Which makes it far more scalable across a broader range of their vehicles.
Exactly. They've also integrated a robust, localized AI assistant for seamless voice control, so you can manage complex functions like navigation, climate, entertainment, all through conversational prompts. It really promotes safer, hands-off-the-wheel driving.
And for those of us seeking connectivity mixed with a bit of nostalgia and focus, there's some interesting consumer tech hitting the market.
Yes, there's the Skylight Calendar 2, which is an AI-integrated 15-inch screen designed to streamline family organization. But perhaps more interestingly, a company called Clix Technology unveiled the Communicator.
The phone with the keyboard?
It's a smartphone case that adds a physical BlackBerry-style keyboard. And it's a very calculated move aimed at high-focus users and professionals who prioritize that tactile productivity and maybe want to signal a rejection of the endless scrolling distraction culture.
Finally, let's return to the cutting edge of computation, the reality check on quantum technology. Faisal Islam was granted rare access inside Google's quantum computer, which is codenamed Willow.
And that report offered a fascinating, if humbling, look into the engineering challenges. The facility requires this ultra-low, sub-zero cryogenic cooling, plunging the machine down close to absolute zero to protect the quantum bits, or qubits, from thermal interference.
So Willow uses these qubits for certain calculations at unprecedented speed, but the environment needed is just immensely complex and fragile.
It is. It's an incredible feat of engineering, but it's fundamentally tethered to those massive cooling requirements.
Meanwhile, are there breakthroughs happening in traditional or classical data transmission speeds that might compete?
There are, and they are equally mind-boggling in a different way. Scientists have developed a way to use ultra-fast UVC laser pulses with durations of less than a trillionth of a second, these are femtoseconds, using atom-thin materials.
And this allows for encoding and detecting messages over open space.
At room temperature.
Room temperature, that is the key difference with quantum computing.
Exactly. This discovery, utilizing the speed of light coupled with these atom-thin materials, potentially transforms data transmission speed in communications and imaging systems without any need for cryogenic engineering.
So it demonstrates that the future of computation isn't just one single quantum path.
Not at all. It's a high-stakes race on two fronts. One, prioritizing quantum complexity under extreme conditions, and the other, prioritizing classical speed and resilience at room temperature.
This radical shift in technological and scientific power AI, quantum physics, hypervaluations is, well, predictably, fueling major geopolitical friction. Let's move now to the massive high-stakes conflicts that are defining 2026. We'll begin in the Caribbean with what's being called the Venezuela vortex, which has dramatically escalated following the capture of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, by U.S. Special Forces.
Right.
This action has now led to U.S. officials declaring indefinite control over all Venezuelan oil sales.
And the fallout from that capture is severe and long-lasting. U.S. officials have stated that the revenue generated from these oil sales, and we're talking tens of millions of barrels initially, will be placed under U.S. government oversight.
So they're effectively setting up a shadow government structure to bypass the captured regime.
That's the idea. And President Trump reinforced this posture, suggesting publicly that U.S. involvement and oversight in Venezuela could last for years, emphasizing a sustained period of control over the nation's primary resource.
And the international reaction was, as you'd expect, instantaneous and highly critical. this wasn't viewed by most nations as a simple regime change.
No, it was seen as an overt imperialist violation of sovereignty. And the condemnation crossed traditional boundaries. The Colombian guerrilla group, the ELN, rejected the operation immediately. China and Russia condemned it, citing interference.
But the big one was Switzerland.
Crucially, yes. Switzerland, a historically neutral party known for its adherence to international norms, described the alleged kidnapping and military operation as a clear violation of established international law.
So the consistent message is that a great power can't just unilaterally violate sovereignty and deploy force to seize the assets of another state.
Regardless of the captured leader status, that's the diplomatic friction point.
And to underscore this aggressive new posture, we saw a sudden, tense incident known as the tanker tussle erupt in the North Atlantic.
This was a clear assertion of maritime power enforcement. U.S. forces seized 2 sanctioned oil tankers right off the coast of Scotland.
And one of them was Russian-flagged.
Yes, the Russian-flagged Marinera. Both vessels were suspected of violating the ongoing sanctions against Venezuelan oil exports.
And the seizure was publicly supported by a key European ally.
That's right. The UK Ministry of Defense confirmed it provided enabling support for the seizure. This act of military enforcement on the open ocean, involving 2 NATO-aligned powers seizing a Russian-flagged vessel, represents a significant escalation.
It shifts sanction enforcement from just financial penalties to active military-backed interdiction.
And far, far from Venezuelan territorial waters.
So Russia's foreign ministry responded immediately.
Of course. Condemning the action as unlawful and demanding humane treatment for the crew. So what does it signal when 2 great powers work together to seize a third power's flag vessel on the high seas?
Well, it seems to signal a dangerous shift in global resource enforcement. Critics are arguing it sets a dangerous precedent where powerful nations can enforce their own sanctions unilaterally through military means.
And that challenges the entire traditional structure of maritime security and global trade. Euro-Atlantic tensions, which were already fraught, have escalated considerably over this.
However, amid all this aggression, we see a peculiar regional diplomatic shift. Colombian President Gustavo Petro, who was previously sanctioned by the U.S. and strongly condemned the Maduro raid,
Yes.
was nonetheless invited to the White House by President Trump.
This is a classic example of what's called realpolitik in action, the political balancing act. Petro and Trump reportedly spoke cordially, potentially resetting a tense relationship that began when the U.S. sanctioned Petro over drug trafficking accusations.
So the invitation signals Trump's pragmatic willingness to engage with leaders who are critical of his policies if it serves broader regional stability.
Especially following the destabilizing Maduro capture.
But Petro hasn't backed down from his critique of U.S. policy in the region.
Not at all. He recently reiterated his condemnation of the Maduro raid as a sovereignty violation. And more strategically, he used the moment to criticize the U.S. for prioritizing oil access and control over sustainable development in Latin America.
He's pushing for investment in clean energy projects.
Actively. He's challenging the traditional U.S. focus on fossil fuels and military intervention in the region.
Now let's pivot way north, to the Arctic scramble and transatlantic tensions, starting with the deeply complex Greenland question.
The White House confirmed that President Trump is actively discussing the potential purchase of Greenland, which is a territory of Denmark. This reflects a long-held strategic U.S. desire.
And the island holds immense geopolitical importance.
It does. Its strategic location in the Arctic gives access to emerging sea lanes and vast untapped mineral resources that are being exposed by climate change.
But this isn't viewed as just some quirky real estate negotiation by Europe, is it? Especially not by Denmark.
Far from it. U.S. officials, including Secretary Rubio, are meeting with Danish counterparts amidst what are being openly described as growing fears that Washington might try to take control by coercive means, or even by force.
Given the aggressive tone we just saw in the Caribbean.
Exactly. European allies are actively strategizing their collective response, emphasizing Denmark's ironclad commitment to its territorial integrity. The prospect of a major NATO ally threatening the sovereignty of another allied nation over territory is just inherently destabilizing to the entire alliance structure.
And the instability within NATO itself is being made worse by President Trump's recent statements regarding NATO reliability.
Trump expressed profound skepticism about the core reliability of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. Specifically, he publicly doubted that the alliance would intervene on behalf of the U.S. if the U.S. were attacked.
And that statement is just immensely consequential. It undermines the very foundation of the alliance. The principle of collective defense, Article 5.
Article 5 being the principle that an attack on one is considered an attack on all. Publicly questioning that principle just erodes trust among members. It affects the perception of U.S. commitment globally and, crucially, it may accelerate European efforts to achieve greater defense autonomy, independent of Washington.
Which they might feel they need amidst increasing global threats, particularly with Russia's persistent aggression in Eastern Europe. It creates friction within the massive system designed to ensure collective security.
Absolutely.
Speaking of rising threats and friction, let's shift focus over to Asia, to the Asian security and trade battles, where China is flexing its economic and trade muscle very aggressively.
The Korean Peninsula remains a central fault line, and South Korea is actively maneuvering to manage the existential risks posed by Pyongyang.
How so?
The South Korean leadership reached out directly to China's President Xi Jinping, requesting his assistance as a critical mediator regarding North Korea's stalled denuclearization talks and its recent military provocations.
Now, no concrete breakthroughs were announced, but the fact that both sides emphasize their commitment to regional peace signals a key strategy shift.
It does. South Korea seems to be moving away from demanding immediate full denuclearization and toward more of a risk management strategy, using China, North Korea's primary economic and political ally, as the essential bridge to maintain dialogue.
So it's a complex, high-wire act of diplomacy. It acknowledges that China holds significant leverage over Pyongyang, even if it doesn't always use it.
And the focus is no longer about removing the nuclear weapons tomorrow, but about managing their proliferation and reducing the chance of a miscalculation today.
Meanwhile, the relationship between China and Japan is quickly escalating over Taiwan. China imposed new restrictions on dual-use exports crucial for Japan's military, a clear use of trade as a weapon.
China's action is direct retaliation for comments made by the Japanese Prime Minister about potential security threats related to Taiwan's status. The targeted items are highly critical.
We're talking rare earth materials for advanced defense systems, specialized semiconductors.
Things like that, yes. By restricting these dual-use materials, China is directly impacting Japan's ability to modernize its own defensive forces.
And that wasn't the only economic punishment they imposed.
No. Simultaneously, China launched an investigation into imports of something called dichlorosilane, alleging Japan was falsely pricing low imports, a form of dumping to harm China's domestic industry.
And on top of that, China's ambassador issued a strong condemnation of recent U.S. arms sales to Taiwan,
calling them an explicit threat to peace in the Taiwan Strait. All these micro-actions, they intensify the perception that the Taiwan Strait is operating under extreme tension, and that China is willing to deploy immediate economic and diplomatic punishment to enforce its geopolitical claims.
Finally, we see India's balancing act, caught squarely between the Asian rivals and the U.S. over energy policy.
India is walking a very difficult tightrope when it comes to Russian oil imports. The U.S. Senate is currently considering a Trump-backed bill that threatens massive tariffs, up to 500% on imports from both India and China over their continued trade in Russian oil.
Which, of course, helps fund Russia's military operations. This is a direct, severe economic threat aimed at enforcing the U.S. sanctions regime globally.
It is. But India has a countermove, signaling a warming diplomatic relationship with Beijing. Reports indicate India plans to lift restrictions that have barred Chinese companies from bidding on government contracts since 2020.
Those restrictions were put in place following border clashes?
They were. So this move signals a strategic calculation. India is challenging the U.S. position on Russian oil while simultaneously easing the diplomatic and economic climate with its powerful neighbor, China. It is a textbook example of non-alignment and strategic hedging in a multipolar, resource-constrained world.
And this global political friction is just intrinsically linked to the immediate threats we face from nature, the enduring clues left by our ancestors, and the societal fractures plaguing our systems. We'll start with the largest threat to long-term global cooperation, the climate. And the U.S. withdrawal from international bodies continues unabated.
The Trump administration announced a formal withdrawal from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC.
And 29 other specific UN agencies.
Yes. This follows the earlier exit from the Paris Agreement, which makes the U.S. the only major industrialized nation to formally withdraw from the entire UNFCCC framework.
Now, Secretary Rubio justified this by criticizing these organizations as being fundamentally mismanaged and contrary to U.S. interests, focusing on sovereignty and cost.
Conversely, critics, including former U.S. climate officials, argue that this action just isolates the U.S. from global policymaking and creates a vacuum.
A vacuum that benefits countries like China.
Precisely. They can step in and exert greater influence over future climate policies, technology standards, and massive infrastructure investments. It's viewed as a short-sighted move that severely diminishes U.S. influence in a critical global domain.
The science, meanwhile, provides constant alarming updates. We have the icebreaker era reaching the Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica.
This is a critical research mission because the Thwaites Glacier, often terrifyingly nicknamed the Doomsday Glacier, is one of the world's fastest melting glaciers. The data being gathered by the scientists aboard the Aeron is essential for accurately modeling and predicting future global sea level rise.
If Thwaites fully collapses, it could destabilize the entire West Antarctic ice sheet,
which would lead to catastrophic coastal flooding projections. This research just highlights the urgency of understanding these massive systems-level changes happening in the cryosphere.
And the local impact of these massive changes is immediate, especially in the UK, which was just hit by a storm called Storm Goretti.
Storm Goretti brought heavy snow, ice, strong winds, causing widespread travel and power disruptions. But the most dire immediate consequence involves the geological risk facing coastal communities. Urgent warnings were issued advising residents of 14 specific cliff-top homes to evacuate immediately due to the imminent risk of collapse. And this danger has been significantly exacerbated by storm-driven erosion, illustrating how climate shifts directly impact property stability and public safety right now.
But amidst these massive global threats, we are seeing some fantastic, often microscopic, community-driven solutions emerging, like bike buses.
The bike bus movement, which we're seeing in growing numbers in U.S. schools, for instance in Tempe, Arizona, is a wonderful community-driven solution to several modern problems.
So what is it?
It involved children riding bicycles to school together, accompanied by parents who act as guides and escorts. It promotes active commuting, physical and mental well-being, and it reduces local traffic congestion, which is a massive benefit for neighborhoods.
And it cuts down on pollution from school drop-offs.
Yeah, exactly. A similar focus on decentralized sustainability is happening in Brazil. Brazil's making a strong push for renewable energy diversification. They recently commissioned a large-scale biomethane plant in São Paulo. And this facility is innovative because it uses municipal organic waste things, like food scraps and sewage, to produce cleaner energy.
So it's not just diversifying energy, it's also a sustainable solution for local waste management.
And it helps reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with landfills. So win-win.
All right, now let's travel back in time, seeking clues about community, complexity, and identity through archaeology and history.
A fascinating discovery was made by amateur archaeologists in Hungary. The 1,100-year-old remains of 3 warriors.
And the analysis of the artifacts and the positioning of the bodies suggest 2 of them are likely a father and son.
It does, and this offers a poignant and deeply informative window into the social structures of ancient warrior classes. It fundamentally underscores the importance of familial ties and lineage in maintaining status and power.
So the fact that they were buried with specific artifacts reflective of their status shows that inherited lineage mattered immensely.
It did. And the ambiguity surrounding the 3rd warrior. Was he a trusted comrade? A relative who failed to achieve the same status? It forces archaeologists to consider the layered complexities of kinship and community in that era.
And moving even further back, a 7,500-year-old artifact found in eastern Türkiye is forcing us to rethink the sophistication of Neolithic society. They found an administrative seal.
Uncovered at the Tadem fortress site, this unique stone seal suggests an incredibly advanced level of societal complexity in the Neolithic era. Before the formal advent of written language, this seal indicated the presence of early, sophisticated forms of administration, record-keeping, and community identity.
So it wasn't just decoration, it points to established trade networks.
And organized economic practices. It shows a level of societal structure we usually associate with much later, more complex civilizations.
So we've always been organized, even if we don't have writing yet. The concept of identity and tracking resources is deeply embedded in human behavior.
It seems so. And just briefly Briefly, reinforcing the complexity of our origins, archaic human fossils were discovered near Casablanca, Morocco, suggesting a distinct bridging population in Africa that adds another essential layer to the intricate map of humanity's evolutionary roots.
It's always more complicated than we thought.
Always.
Finally, we have to pivot to the deep, massive fractures plaguing our modern societies. Failures in trust, transparency, and safety protocols that impact the micro-level lives of citizens.
We have an alarming, really shocking report from the UK concerning the Metropolitan Police, one of the world's largest law enforcement bodies. A rigorous review revealed that 131 staff members were not properly vetted prior to their employment.
A failure that points to deep, systemic vulnerabilities.
It does. And the worst-case scenario was realized. That group included 2 convicted rapists, David Carrick and Cliff Mitchell, who were allowed to serve as officers.
This is a catastrophic systemic oversight that completely shatters public confidence.
It is. David Carrick, for example, was convicted of 37 life sentences for serial rape. Yet the vetting process failed to flag or adequately investigate a prior domestic abuse allegation.
So the implication is clear. Systemic flaws allowed proven predators to hold positions of immense power and public trust.
And this requires immediate, non-negotiable systemic reform and robust accountability to even begin to restore public safety.
Moving across the Atlantic, we see the crisis in immigration enforcement leading to tragedy in Minneapolis, in the U.S.
A U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, agent fatally shot 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good during an operation in Minneapolis. Authorities claim the woman posed an immediate threat to the officers, but the incident sparked widespread protests and outrage.
It highlights the extreme tensions surrounding immigration enforcement, particularly the use of lethal force by federal agents operating in local communities.
It does. And the press is clearly affected by this charged environment. A Salvadoran journalist reported spending 112 days in ICE detention despite having a valid work permit, simply for covering an anti-Trump protest.
Which illustrates the fraught relationship between enforcement agencies, public dissent, and the freedom of the press.
And simultaneously, in the UK, we see the legal difficulty in managing dangerous crossings. An 18-year-old named Aman Nasseri became the first person charged under new, stricter UK legislation for allegedly endangering 46 migrants during a perilous English Channel crossing. It just raises these profound humanitarian and legal questions about accountability.
And finally, let's address the profound, unnecessary trauma caused by systemic miscommunication and loss from authorities. We have 2 similar tragic incidents involving the police that demonstrate a failure in basic protocol.
The first involved the family of Joshua Johnson, who were mistakenly told by police that their son had survived a fatal car crash, only to later receive the correction that he had in fact died.
They described the false hope and subsequent reality as unimaginable, just compounding their grief exponentially.
And the second incident involved police misidentifying a deceased teen based only on a vague description and a college ID, failing to conduct basic forensic protocols before notifying the family.
Receiving news of a fatality is agonizing enough, but having that grief compounded by preventable errors and systemic failures is a profound betrayal of public trust.
The lesson here, for all authorities involved, is the critical importance of strict adherence to established forensic protocols and, equally crucial, compassionate, accurate, and verified communication in crisis situations. These fundamental mistakes just inflict unnecessary, enduring psychological trauma on families who are already at their most vulnerable.
We shift now from societal strain and trauma to economic strain, examining global markets and financial discontent. Our final section focuses on the bottom line. We have deep trade friction between massive economic blocs and some highly impactful, localized financial battles happening worldwide.
The widespread unrest across Europe is directly linked to global trade policy decisions made far, far above the individual farm. French farmers drove scores of tractors into Paris, gathering near the Eiffel Tower to protest the proposed EU-Mercosur trade deal with South American countries.
What specifically are they fearing from this agreement?
They fear that the agreement will flood the European market with cheaper agricultural imports from South America that are often produced under less stringent environmental or labor standards.
Creating unsustainable economic jeopardy for small European farms.
Exactly. And the protest highlights deep dissent within the European Union, with powerful agricultural nations like France, Italy, and Poland openly opposing the deal. The farmers feel abandoned. They argue these massive international free trade agreements jeopardize their livelihoods and force painful, localized measures, like the culling of cows to combat disease, which they see as a direct consequence of global market pressure.
Moving to industry, the powerhouse German automotive sector is facing major headwinds, particularly in China, which used to be its most dominant market.
The German auto industry is struggling to keep pace because China is rapidly shifting toward domestic production of electric vehicles, or EVs. Reports show that every second car sold in China is now electric.
Which challenges German manufacturers like Volkswagen, who historically relied so heavily on robust sales there.
It forces these German giants to aggressively pivot, relying increasingly on growth in the less predictable Indian market to compensate for the decline in their primary revenue stream.
And this slowdown appears to be hitting the Indian service sector, too. It shows that global uncertainty is contagious.
That's right. Top Indian information technology, or IT firms, are bracing for another tepid quarter. This is attributed to weak U.S. demand and highly constrained client spending post-pandemic.
So major international clients are pulling back sharply on discretionary tech spending.
And on new project initiation. And that directly impacts the revenue projections and growth capacity of major Indian IT players.
Speaking of volatility, the cryptocurrency turbulence continues, affecting a market estimated at around $1.2 trillion.
We're seeing these wild swings driven by contradictory forces. On one hand, the rise of highly volatile meme currencies like Dogecoin or DOGE has injected instability, impacting confidence in the fundamental valuation of traditional digital assets.
But the more significant driver of volatility is institutional activity.
Absolutely. Bitcoin prices have recently retreated dramatically due to heavy institutional outflows from high-profile ETFs, particularly those managed by giants like BlackRock and Fidelity.
So institutional investors are taking profits and moving their massive capital, which then causes the whole crypto market to drop.
Exactly. It demonstrates how highly sensitive the entire $1.2 trillion crypto market has become to the profit-taking and strategic movements of these large institutional players. It proves that crypto stability is intrinsically linked to the actions of the massive financial systems it was initially designed to disrupt.
Finally, let's look at the localized battles affecting fiscal health and citizens' wallets, starting with a debt crisis far away.
Uganda is facing a severe national debt crisis. The national debt has swelled dramatically, hitting $32.3 billion, and that's been exacerbated by a recent $2.5 billion loan from international lenders.
So economists are sounding sharp alarms.
They are. They're warning that continued fiscal indiscipline is leading to stalled infrastructure projects and chronic underfunding of essential public services, creating a real humanitarian crunch.
Now, the government's counterargument is that the debt-to-GDP ratio remains manageable at 51%, and they're anticipating robust future economic growth from imminent oil production. Is that realistic?
Well, that is the counter-narrative. But critics stress that the borrowing is fundamentally unsustainable without deep, immediate structural reforms. Relying on future oil production to bail out current spending is a very high-risk gamble.
And the public ends up bearing the burden of these debts through rising taxes and austerity.
Often seeing little benefit in return, which leads to widespread public erosion of trust in financial management.
Then we have a fascinating insurance liability debate in the U.S. over the cost of coverage. Some parents in Michigan reported that Geico refused a car crash claim.
This is a highly specific but critical case. It highlights the importance of scrutinizing the fine print, the reason for the claim denial. Their baby and toddler were not explicitly listed as drivers or dependents on the insurance policy.
Wait. The policyholders need to list minor dependents who legally cannot drive on their automotive insurance just to ensure coverage during an accident? That seems absurd.
It does. But this situation highlights the potential legal loophole that insurance companies can exploit. It underscores the unexpected liability consumers can face and the crucial need for consumers to scrutinize the complex language of liability clauses, especially concerning non-driving family members, to ensure they are fully covered in an accident.
And across the pond, property owners are battling taxation in the UK.
Beachhead owners in a place called Moodford are fiercely contesting a local council plan to double their council tax. The council is attempting to classify their huts as second homes, which dramatically increases the tax burden.
And the owners argue this classification is unfair and potentially legally dubious.
They do. They fear the crushing financial burden, especially since many use the huts for personal leisure, not for commercial rentals.
But the council argues the increased revenue is necessary to support essential public services in the local community.
And that is the friction point. This isn't just a local spat. It sets a complex fiscal precedent for how governments might start taxing leisure versus commercial properties in desirable tourist areas.
shifting the financial strain of public services onto non-resident property owners.
which could have ripple effects on vacation property taxes globally.
We have certainly covered the vast spectrum of human endeavor and global friction today. Our deep dive started right inside your own body, exploring those hidden fiber networks and the mysterious flexoelectricity driving our cells. We shot out to the quantum field, watched coherence stabilize chaos, and then we tracked the explosive growth of anthropic AI and the ethical landmines facing Grok and Character.ai.
And we didn't shy away from the massive systemic shifts that are defining global power. The aggressive U.S. seizure of Venezuelan assets and oil tankers, the Arctic scramble for Greenland, and that escalating trade war between China and Japan.
It shows how quickly the geopolitical landscape is shifting.
It is, and often faster than safety protocols can keep up, whether that's in AI ethics, police vetting failures, or maritime resource enforcement. It's creating this intense tension between the microscopic and the massive.
And being well informed about all these interconnected issues, from how quantum physics might enable new technologies to how high-level diplomacy determines everything from energy prices to the fate of a nuclear-armed peninsula, is just essential for navigating 2026. This is the new global literacy.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. We noted that both the U.S. and the U.K. confirmed their aggressive involvement in the seizure of a Russian oil tanker tied to Venezuelan sanctions on the high seas. We also detailed the sharp condemnation from China, Russia, and notably the historically neutral Switzerland, labeling the move a severe violation of international law and sovereignty.
Okay.
The question we must grapple with is this. Given this aggressive approach to enforcing sanctions unilaterally through military force on the open ocean, are we witnessing the beginning of a new, dangerous era of resource enforcement where the powerful bypass traditional diplomatic consensus?
And what specific precedent does this aggressive action set for the future of maritime security, for global trade norms, and for the sanctity of international law itself?
That's the question.
An immense and essential question to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll talk to you next time.
For enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.